Hi everyone, my name's Declan McGlynn. Welcome to Friday Forum Live, Point Blank's weekly broadcast bringing you exclusive tutorials, artist interviews and industry insight every Friday live from East London. Today we are joined by DJ, producer and Point Blank instructor Stefano Ritteri to look at 3 ways to beat creative block. So today is all about getting over the creative hump and creating great ideas and music. But if you want to dive deeper into music production and music making, make sure you check out our full range of courses at pointblanklondon.com. And remember, we are completely live, so get your questions in for Stefano and we'll get to them throughout the broadcast. Stefano, welcome.
Good morning.
How are you?
Slightly hungover.
Of course.
Of course.
Classic.
It's Friday.
Yes.
But good. Happy to be here. Happy to be
Excellent.
back.
So creative block, I mean, happens to every type of producer and every genre.
Absolutely.
Apart from you.
Apart from me, because I have 3 ways of fighting.
Exactly, and that's what we're here to talk about.
Yes.
Lovely link.
Coffee, alcohol,
PlayStation,
and amenities. No, well, it happens obviously to everybody, as in like, especially when you're sitting every day in the studio. If you're lucky enough to be able to sit every day in studio, and sometimes you start with some ideas. For example, say that you have to do a remix. I find it a little bit easier because you are somehow forced to start with some ideas. You got the parts from the remix, and so you've got a starting point. But some other times you just sit in front of a blank canvas, and it can be a little frightening, obviously. And this is at any level. It doesn't matter. Obviously, at the beginning, maybe you get a little frightened also by all the technicalities, no? So all the, how I'm gonna make that sound or try to make the song sound good. But when that becomes a little bit more normal, then you still face, the problem of trying to make something nice. Yeah. And this is something also that comes up very often, when you talk with other producers, and everyone has their own tricks, everyone has their own ways. I had recently an interesting conversation about it with a pretty big producer that was telling me, for example, his approach to spark creativity is to sit down in studio but not start songs, just collecting ideas, collecting samples, a cappellas or samples from movies or ideas, and then put them all in a folder in the desktop. And then when he has a lot of them, then he actually starts, opens Ableton or Cubase or whatever. And then, he puts all of them together in the session, and then he starts playing them really quickly. And whatever sparks, an idea, and that very moment, then he starts writing a groove behind it. So that's a way. And I have tried this a few times myself. So I spend a long time trying to have a good sample collection. Both made of sample libraries that we can all buy, but also try to have something a little personal. So putting everything in a folder. Sometimes I spend days recording myself singing, and I'm a horrible singer, or like playing weird instruments, or going around parks recording sounds, and I put everything in a folder. So I sometimes have that approach as well, but most of the times what I do is I sit down every day and I start lots of grooves. So I start drums, I put percussions, I spend a long time doing grooves. And then what I do is when a groove it's nice, when I like it, I just save it and close it and start something else. So sometimes I create 4 or 5 grooves every day. Literally, I don't worry about what's gonna be next. It's just nice drums, nice percussion.
So that's just like, instead of thinking about this,
I have to make a song. Exactly.
It's just like a 16 bar.
16 bar, 32 bars, maybe some variations, and then leave it there, save it. And sometimes I do this for 4 or 5 days in a row, until I feel a bit guilty, and then I think, all right, and now I might as well make a song, and I go back listening to those grooves, and most of I don't remember any of them because I start so quickly that then I listen to them in a quick, and then again 1 of them or 2 of them maybe make me think, oh wow, okay, this is worth continuing, and then I try several techniques. As I said, I find it very boring to try to sit in front of a, even a nice drum groove, and then try several bass lines. It doesn't work for me. So during over the years, I found a few ways of trying to get some random help. Randomness I think is a good help.
So shall we take a look at maybe 3 of those ways?
Yes, 3, 5. We'll see. But what I do, I don't know. Let's maybe start. I'll just start the drum groove. So
okay.
we have something. So I'm just gonna load quickly. A drum rack. This is a good 808 drum rack I found. It's free. It's 808 compressed in a Fairchild compressor. It's free on the internet if you guys want to download it. It's pretty cool.
We will put the link in the description.
Yes.
Later.
So I found it. It sounds pretty beefy. It's just an 808, but with a good groove. So what I do is I just literally create the resolution in here. I'm gonna get blind here. I need glasses. I'm gonna just create a super simple drum groove without thinking too much. I literally go pretty random. Just something to try. Then, for example, one thing I like to do, I like to keep I don't have many samples in this computer because this is not my studio computer, it's the traveling one. But I always keep with me some acapellas. For example, these are from classic salsols, which can never be used. Other previous, I've been threatened already. With lawsuits.
These aren't to like sample in the track. They're just
No, officially no. I'll never use this in any of my songs. No. But what I do is I like to load them, just listen to some of them and load them, and because obviously they have some melodic content, Well, not that one. Yeah, that one. That's one. Sometimes just by loading that, we already have an idea, a melody or something that we can build something on, whereas if I try to come up with a bass line without any melody in my head, I'm like, So sometimes, again, acapellas can be a good starting point because I build a whole song around it and then I remove the acapella to avoid a lawsuit. Or sometimes I eventually call a singer and try to get something brand new, something fresh. Mm-hmm. But, there are several ways of working acapellas. One of my favorite ways is try to replicate a little bit the old school samplers vibe, because back in the days, before Ableton, we had samplers, right? And so we have these very expensive machines with very low, with very short recording time. So we would sample from vinyl or from whatever it is that we were sampling. And if you were if you were changing the speed of the sample, it would actually destroy pretty much the sample. That was the typical Akai effect. So that obviously doesn't happen with Ableton. Ableton is a perfect machine in the sense that we can change the speed and it just goes, perfectly in time. But I like a little bit that grainy sound of old school samplers, which, some producers have used in a very creative mode. Fatboy Slim has been the guy, that famously has stretched samples to make them so slow that, it became so granny and weird. Rockefeller Skank, it was the first song I remember that I've heard using that. And with Ableton, I sometimes when I use acapellas, I replicate that to make them sound completely weird. So, for example, you see the warp mode here, I use texture, which is basically replicating an old school sampler. And when I have a phrase like this, I would just highlight some completely randomly some hit points. And then you can play around with grain size and flux. And you get this typical stretching, Then let me copy this. Maybe we can add a little, if I can see, I can add a little higher. Here it is. Oh my God, I might need glasses, I need to go to the doctor.
There's almost a groove within that stretching as well.
Exactly, it becomes almost like a percussive little number. Where is the open? And if you destroy it a lot using this system, basically you can almost leave it there and not get sued. If you destroy it enough, maybe pitching it up and down, adding some. But then again, I just keep acapellas because to me they're a very good idea to have some melody in there and then build around. Yeah. Sometimes I destroy them this way. Some other times I use them entirely and I build an amazing arrangement around them, and then I just delete them. So again, this is kind of similar to what we were saying at the beginning. Having something that can spark an idea. So to me, acapellas are the easiest way to start some idea. Mm-hmm. Then another thing I like to do, for example, real quick, is if I load, say I load some percussive groove. Let me see what I have here. Let's see if we can find something that fits quickly. Let's see, something a little bit more. So, for example, say that we add this one for a little bit of like a little groove. Another thing I do, which again is pretty cool in Ableton, is I copy the same percussive groove, and because we work on loop, we work on loops, and then we extend it eventually. But to kind of keep the creativity going, what I do is I change. If I make some little variations, for example, of this super simple, let's mute the super simple percussive groove, right? So if I highlight the hit, I make some variation. And then I make a third variation here. And then I find that if I try to make them move a little bit without me worrying too much about it, using some Ableton functions, now I'm gonna run them. Right, so I've got 3 variations, right? So what I would do, just very quickly, I would select them all, use the launch, which is one of my favorite functions here. I put any, so basically Ableton now will launch the clips in a random way. Let's say every 4 bars. And because Ableton is changing them now, so you see now it's playing the second one, then we'll play the first. Basically, I don't think about it, but when I keep building with other elements, because some variations are happening, so I do this, for example, with my hi-hats, with my snares, because they keep varying without me thinking about it, with me like thinking about something else, it kind of keeps my my creativity going a little bit. Whereas if I'm listening just to a clip, after 1 hour, I'm bored. So this is a function I use a lot. Whenever I'm writing drums or percussions, I make lots of variations, and then I make them change completely randomly. And sometimes I leave them random even when I'm then recording the arrangement. So I just leave them random. I use different colors, so afterwards I can check out and maybe go and in the arrangement view try to.
The cool thing about that is you can create different variations with like moving to a range page.
Exactly.
Sometimes you want to avoid the whole arrange page.
Absolutely. Until the very end.
Frame, yeah.
Until the very end. That's the thing. I use we were commenting before. I use a combination of Ableton and Cubase for different reasons. But for this Ableton, for using the clips, is what really makes it really creative to me. So again, this is something that because things are constantly changing in the background. It's kind of interesting to me, and then I'm not bored as easily. You know what I mean? Yeah. So this is another thing. Another function I like to use a lot is I try to squeeze melodies out of other things, So there is this very nice function of Ableton of, getting a melody out of, I think it was made primarily, for example, if you're working on a remix or trying to make an edit of something, you put a sample in it, and Ableton analyzes it, and then you can find out pretty much, what's the key. Of that, and for that is very useful. But I like to use it a little bit more like random is the word today. Random. Today's Random Friday. So sometimes I load some percussions and try to see if they have any melodic content, or even Balkan brass. Okay, let's see if there is something here. For example.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Smooth.
I'm not a fan of saxophones, I gotta say. But, I know. I don't know why, but I've never been a fan. But, so if I put it in complex here, say that here we go. Back to 2008, you know what I mean? No problem. But what I would do, because the sound of saxophone is dreadful, I would no, it's not dreadful. To all the saxophone players out there, I love all musicians, I love all music. I just hate the saxophone. Yeah. So what I would do, you see, we hear the function, harmony, melody, and drums. And sometimes I experiment, mostly I use melody. So I do convert melody to a new Midi track, which I'm sure many people have used. And then sometimes it's pretty ridiculous what it comes out of it. But, there you go. Arabian Princess Night, you know what I mean? For all the ladies out there.
Track's done.
Track is done.
Save, export.
Let's go to the pub. That's the moment where I go to the pub. Just very quickly, I want to put a compressor on the master to avoid the red. Don't go in red. Kids, don't go red. So I'm just using quickly the glue compressor. I would explain my settings, but this is for another Friday.
Of course.
So it's just quickly to avoid clicking. And this beautiful Arabic melody, very romantic. Let's take off the instrument there, and then perhaps adding. But I quite like that weird tonal mode, whatever, gypsy. So for example, I'm pretty sure that if we use something like maybe a kalimba, something like that can take. Let's see, mallet, big kalimba. Here you go. This is a good one. And suddenly it's UK garage, you know what I mean? Like you can then
save it, go to the pub. Done. Again. But I mean, in all seriousness, that's probably a riff that you might not write. And you can just dive straight in. And
exactly, and then, I mean, obviously, it's not super... And again, this is not the best riff in the world, but this definitely makes me think about maybe I can add, a bass in between the hits, or add a little whatever weird, tone on top of it, and then try maybe, an a cappella of some rapper, definitely something like this from a saxophone, it can generate, and then again, this is all about, to me, it's just about trying to squeeze something out of nowhere from in thin air, as magicians say. Yeah. So this is a function I use a lot, actually, the melody to Midi. And then the first thing to do is always to remember to switch off the instrument that Ableton opens, that weird piano,
the operator,
because that makes you just want to leave the studio straight away.
But then you could also load like a drum rack on that. So
for sure. For sure. You can trigger whatever you want. In fact, I do it sometimes. As I said, the melody one is the one I use the most when I'm using loops, like in this case. But otherwise, I put an entire song in it and see what, sometimes it's pretty hilarious what Ableton comes up with. But then again, it's a system that I find pretty interesting, and that sometimes I do it with acapellas as well. Or for example, if I'm working on a remix, I would put the acapella of the original and find out some notes. I don't really use it to find harmonies or such, or what MIDI note, what MIDI key, even though it's really good for that. I use it more like to get something, and then again, maybe we're never gonna use this beautiful gypsy whatever. But maybe, if we keep building something around it, it was worth it to have a saxophone loop, and occupying my hard drive, basically. So this is another thing I use a lot. What else do I use? I use Reactor. I use Reactor a lot because, well, besides the new Reactor 6, which obviously it has the modular stuff, which is really, really, really impressive.
It's awesome.
And I'm still learning it. I'm watching videos and I'm still learning it. But what I like about Reactor is that there are so many modules from 20 years, basically. It's been almost 20 years.
The user library, yeah.
Yeah, the user library has been there forever. So, where is it? Reactor 6. So what I do is I go through, well, again, in this computer I don't have them, but in my studio computer I've been using Reactor for more than 10 years. But so, yeah, it's crazy. And so I have like a nice collection of ensembles and modules, that they work. But even just in the factory library, you can find some. What I do is sometimes I just use sequence synthesizers or the sequencers and just add a little. I like particularly to add, for example, floating point. I wonder. That's where he got his name then. I see. But you know what I mean. But something, it has, all these weird sequence, the graphics of these are clearly 15 years old, and sometimes I have no clue about what they do. But but just by, you basically, it's a never-ending, inspiring. Which one is one of my favorite? I think it's Blue Matrix.
Oh yeah, that is cool.
That has this beautiful, and you can literally just draw the notes like this. So again, I have no idea exactly what these lines do. I mean, one is the pitch, one is the automation of the filter. But add a little bit of movement, I find that these are just perfect. Particularly, no floating point again. No. For example, I don't know. This one has a few like, what if it would play? It has all these weird, nice things, or even in the groove boxes, you can come up with. Where is Limelight? Let me see.
Limelight is good too.
Limelight. Okay, let's go in Limelight, right? And all of these things, and then what I do is I just automate all those knobs and record something that would go maybe. in the super background, like I wouldn't keep the whole kick and snare and everything. But I go and what I do is I record the track, an audio track, just for Reactor. I always have it open, so I record little movements of the knobs and stuff, so it stays just in the background basically. And again, I literally go randomly through different patterns of Reactor. And when I find a couple of things, they never become like a major part of the song, but I like things that move in the background. So when I find some little groove or little pattern, what I do is, as I said, I record it live for like a minute, and I twist every knob, not exactly knowing what it is, and then I put it really, really low in the mix with a big side chain, so it doesn't really occupy too much space, but it kind of moves, in that minute, it moves all the time. So kind of, again, it keeps it a little interesting, basically. Yeah. So I use Reactor very much.
And I think it is right that Reactor Player is free and it will load anything from the library as well.
I think so. I don't think it will load everything from the library, but like 90% of things it is.
Cool.
So yeah,
you can just go there, download, get all this stuff for free.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. I mean, and even if you buy it, I don't know how much it is. I think it's £80 or something.
Definitely worth
it. It comes with a million synthesizers. Some delays are incredible. Yeah. They have some collection of filters which are super good. You can see that the graphics are not exactly the most sexy, the sexiest.
But that's good for CPU.
Oh, definitely. And it's all about the CPU.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So Reactor, again, it's another randomic idea generator. Randomic idea generator. And what else? Oh yeah, another thing. Last but not least, my favorite.
Number three
Max for Live. Is Max for Live. Again, Max for Live is a sort of a new Reactor, isn't it? Like, as in, like, so many people are making, good devices for it, and you can really, if you go in the library, you can find all sorts of things, and it's really cool. What I do is I like to work with sequencers. So, what are sequencers? Can I stand up? Do you have a? What are sequencers?
If you want, yeah.
We can call sequencers nowadays. Live is a sequencer, Cubase is a sequencer. Wherever we can record a sequence of events, being MIDI or audio. I just gave you the appropriate definition. I'm not even sure that is. But
sounds right to me.
Sounds right. But back in the days, sequencers were those nice big boxes put on top of modular synths. So now we know obviously that synthesizers, we see them in screens, so we like to play with synthesizers. But back in the days, there were these big boxes with cables, and they're quite back in fashion nowadays, as we know. We're spending good money on it. Don't know exactly why, but one of the key components of sequencers of modular synths was the sequencer, because it kind of allowed for people to get like crazy lines that wouldn't be able to play like on a keyboard. So the most famous, in my opinion, the first famous sequenced line was the bass line from I Feel Love, made by my fellow Italian Giorgio, who made that line on a sequencer. And basically, you have the 16 knobs, and every knob represents a note, and then you have the on and off. So sequencers have been there from the beginning of electronic music, and nowadays we can also buy some pretty nice sequencers. Arturia makes some. There are a lot of Beatstep Pro, really cool. Dopefair makes some. But I have some real ones in studio, but sometimes I want to work when I'm on the road. So I looked around, and I found this Japanese guy that made some, like, quite a lot of sequencers actually, and you can buy them. I think it was $10 for the whole package, so super cheap. And he made actually this, which is a replica of the Dopefair Dark sequencer, which is my favorite one, actually.
Dark Time, is it?
Dark Time, yes. So you can see here that basically what this does, this replicates, let me just open maybe a bass line or something. I don't know, let's go Juno, I guess, never go wrong. So what this does, basically, this replicates the function. So if I put in solo, as soon as I press play, what these are all, these are 16 notes, and the position of the knobs determines a note, right? So if I go again, what's the word of the day? Randomly on the knobs, you come out with this very epic, kind of like, straight away epic note. Yeah, and suddenly, it's techno, you know what I mean? Suddenly, if you're wearing a normal shirt, suddenly you have a V-neck, you know what I mean?
It disappears.
If you're wearing whatever, suddenly you have a dark. And you appear at Berghain, and it's 10 in the morning, and you lost all of your friends, and this is the music that you want to listen to at that moment. So, point is that this thing obviously can be customized in so many ways, being modern. So obviously, you know, we can change the octave in case you want to go even more like spaced. Or, for example, you can mute, you know, some steps, so you don't want necessarily to have a runner happening, so you can just go for some notes. Or what is really, really cool, you can select the key, for example, E or whatever key maybe you're working on with a previous a cappella or something, and it has scales like Ableton Push, you know. So basically, you know, you can. What this means, it means that however, you know, it doesn't matter how you're going to move your knobs. They are. Wait, let's delete everything. They're going to keep in the scale. So in this case, minor pentatonic, classic blues. You know what I mean? Everyone likes the blues. So now you can really, you know, literally going randomly, you can come up with some pretty nice ideas. And then it has nice randomization function, so which also changes the tempo, so it creates two jumping points, so the notes go from one to the other. And I'm just gonna press random for another 10 minutes. Bear with me until I find the perfect bass. But the whole point is, once there is something nice in there, you can obviously save it, you know, save several sequences. But wait, I'm just gonna do one quickly. And then what I do is I turn on another Midi track and record the Midi from the sequencer. This is pretty cool. So I just record a couple of bars. And what this means is that then I can switch it off. I will leave it there in case I want to make some crazy variations. But then I have the Midi of the sequencer right here. Mm-hmm. So what I can do is I can apply, for example, the swing that I'm using on my drums. I can apply it there. Or I can simply create some variations. And my favorite way is just go one octave higher and then. And obviously you have, you know, other functions in the sequencer. You have, you know, you have swing, you have gate, so you can decide how long or short you want the notes. Mm-hmm. So again, this is a very old school way of working. Sequencers have been there before synthesizers had keyboards, before Mr. Moog decided to have keyboards. Actually, sequencers were there to generate weird patterns and weird sounds. And because I've always been a fan of that, I really think that it's really cool that now we can, you know, simply get a plugin. There are lots of them which are free. You don't need to buy this one. This guy comes up with some pretty weird sequencers besides this one, really nice. But it's really cool, I think, that you can, you know, just sit down there and twist some knobs and come up with a melody that you wouldn't come out otherwise.
Yeah, totally. And they're all free, right? You can just download if you have Max for Live.
Well, no, this one I think you have to buy it from the guy. Okay. I think for about $10. But otherwise, there are many other which are free for Max for Live.
Yeah, cool. So we got loads of questions coming in.
Oh God!
And keep them coming, and we'll try and answer them all. You?
No, I'm not. Well, yes, I am. I don't know.
TW1 times 5. I hope she's not watching. TW1 times 5,000. Does Stefano use third-party plugins or DAW built-in plugins?
I use a combination. I like some plugins. Well, again, I use both Cubase and Ableton. But in Ableton, there are some plugins which I love, like the glue compressor sounds to me amazing and is one of my favorite compressors ever. I like the equalizers, but I also use UAD plugins when I want to get some character. So I have some tube emulations and, you know, some I use a combination, mostly UAD from my external ones, yes.
Awesome. Ross Watson wants to know, where do you get your good quality vocals from?
I steal them from the internet most. No, I'm lucky. I know many good singers, and I record a lot of singers, and so I have like years and years of recordings from friends and singers, or myself with a lot of effects. Yeah. So people wouldn't know it's myself. So I have a big folder, and sometimes when I for example when I worked with other, you know, for example with Defected or other big labels, they were able, you know, to give me some pretty big acapellas, really big vocals that they own the rights for. So I have a big folder, but I'm constant. Like this week, I spent 2 days with a singer actually recording him, and it's there in a folder. I'm not even sure what I'm gonna do, but I know that at some point I can. So I record lots of vocals myself, or sometimes I was very lucky that I was sent very well produced vocals from labels. Yeah.
Nice one. We got some more. Serge and Selma's asking, what are the interesting effect racks you would recommend or that you use?
I don't use effect racks because I always promise myself I would create some, because when I go to my friends' studios, they have these crazy effect racks, and with one knob, they have the whole song is made. And I'm always promising myself, right, now I'm going back to studio, I'm going to make my own, and then I never make them.
That's the macro.
Yeah, the macro, yeah. Effect racks, well, I have some chains of plugins which I use, over the years. They're not always the same, as in like, I have like 3 or 4 variations. But mostly, for example, if on my master bus, for example, that's a classic. I have I have an SSL compressor, either in the form of a glue compressor or of another emulation that I have, followed by a tape saturation plugin by Steven Slate, which I find really, really cool.
Good.
And after the saturation, I have an EQ. It's called a minimum phase EQ, which is like a mastering EQ, where I remove everything below 30 hertz. So, because anyways, the mastering engineer is going to take it off anyways, and he steals a little bit of headroom. So I always remove a little bit of 30 hertz. So, for example, that's one of the chains I always have open. But then it changes. Like sometimes, like yesterday, I was making some experiments with multiple distortions on the master, and I came up with some industrial 9-inch nail stuff, which I'm sure I'm not going to release. But it's nice to experiment sometimes,
Yeah, for sure. We got a question in Italian here.
All right.
Which only you can read, so I have no idea what it says. So you're going to have to translate for us. From Lorenzo Lodi, he's asking.
Oh, he's asking me if I can give some names. So this one that I'm using is called Dark Sequencer.
What's the name of the sequencer he's asking?
Yeah, the name of the sequencer is called Dark Sequencer. If you Google Dark Sequencer for Max for Live, you will find it. He's a Japanese guy. I would never be able to pronounce his name. It's impossible.
Nice one.
Yes.
Favorite pad or synth plugin? That's from VSPR.
Pad,
as in pads.
Diva as a plugin. Diva, definitely. It does the best pads. Pads for days.
Jalen XO wishes his beard grew out like that, like yours.
I just take hormones and go to Italy. It's the Italian food.
Pasta. We probably get time for one more if I can just quickly find one. Schizo Boy's asking, do you make tracks with chord progressions, or do you base it on just one note or scale? I mean, basically, do you go have a key signature and move within it, or do you just sequence things?
It really depends. Well, when I'm sequencing, I guess the sequence determines the key, you know what I mean? So if I'm starting, for example, just with drums and the sequencer, then whatever line I will come up with, then that will be the key signature, and then I try to move around there. Some other times I approach in a little bit more musical way, but that's when I start. Normally it's when I start without the drums. So for example, when my new Chord mini log arrives, which I'm very jealous that somebody here in the room has and I don't. When that arrives, I'm gonna be for sure enjoying do chord progressions, play chord progressions without drums, and then from there build up a song. But normally when I'm starting with drums, which is 90% of the times, then I don't really worry about whatever chord progression. It will be determined by one thing, either the vocal, and then I move around with it. I like to change a little bit. I'm not a super good player, but I know a little bit of music.
Yeah. Sure thing, nice one. So unfortunately we are out of time for
because
today's
we have to go to the pub,
FFL, because we have to go to the pub. Hopefully you got plenty of inspiration for overcoming your creative blocks. But if you want to put your ideas to good use, make sure you check out our courses at pointblanklondon.com. You can even learn from Stefano.
Yes, I have a course. I do it from home. Just imagine.
So we'll be back next week for another FFL, and we'll see you then. Cheers.
Bye.